Good evening. Today is Monday, August 10th, and this is Violet Haldane, President of the West Indian Foundation. This is another one of our community discussions, and this evening the topic will be on education. We have two guests today, Ms. Nuchette Black-Burke, who is with the City of Hartford and Department of Education, and Ms. Tia Miller, who's with Creativista Charm, which is an education online consulting firm. We're going to start off today with Ms. Nuchette Black-Burke, and we'd just like to have, a discussion on getting our children prepared for school in the fall, for educating our children in the fall. We are, in this pandemic, and can you tell us if any decisions have been made as to how things are going to start off in the fall for the students?
Thank you, Ms. Haldane, and good evening to everyone. Yes, so the state of Connecticut, along with many other states across the U.S., were given the order that school would need to open in the fall. Along with our governor here, Ned Lamont, and the Commissioner of Education, there has been lots of conversation across the state, varying school districts, trying to figure out what works best for their community. So in Hartford will start school on September 8th, but parents do have options. If you are willing to send your child back to school in person, that is an option. There is also an option to continue with distance learning. And if this pandemic continues to worsen, then of course it could be a hybrid model. So that's where the school district is, what the school district has done, because again, this is not a decision that you can make by yourself or in a vacuum. We started polling parents and talking to parents. A survey went out late part of June into July, asking parents their thoughts on what took place over the last few months when we went to our shutdown in March, up to that moment, as far as their thoughts and their feedback on distance learning. Another survey went out after that to families, asking them what would be their will or their interest, wanting to find out from families how many would actually be sending their children back to school in the fall. So right now, the decision again lies with families. The school district is open, but a decision really does lie with families to determine what works best for them, what feels right for them, because we're in a pandemic. So the school district is open, but parents have the right to choose what works best for them and their household.
So I just want to make sure I understood. The parents have a choice of sending you in person, their child in person, or they can choose distance learning, or they can choose both options, or just either or at this time? Because you said a hybrid, and I wasn't sure when they could use the hybrid. I think you're on mute.
Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so option A is in-person learning, and that will be it can also become a hybrid model if the health condition worsens. Option B is online learning to start, and then you can opt in to in-person at a later time if that's what you decide.
Okay.
As far as a description, in-person learning, students come safely to school. They come to school, they learn in school. The hybrid, again, is going to be based on if this pandemic worsens. Out on the Hartford Public School website, we are using an operational decision meter that kind of walks you through varying levels. So if there's some threat to the broader community, whether it's more cases in Connecticut or there happens to be a cluster in a school, we will use the operational decision meter to determine if we need to move into that hybrid way. And then there's 100% online learning, where students safely learn in their homes or wherever their parents have selected for them to do their online lessons. So hopefully that clarifies it, Ms. Haldane. And I can also share with the Coalition of West Indian Organizations the document that was sent out to families describing our return to learn plan from Hartford Public Schools. Also, because I realize it's not just Hartford, and I do feel comfortable to talk about Windsor. I served on Windsor's Board of Education for a little while. Windsor has also put out a similar plan, and Bloomfield, they also have a plan. And right now those plans are up on websites. So I'll stop right there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
How can parents prepare their children to return to school? Is there anything they should talk to them about or do?
You know, I think that's a really, really important question. I'm a mom. I have two boys, 14 and 6 years old. And, you know, children, even though they have same mom, dad, they grew up in the same house, all of that, but they're very different, right? They're very, very different, very, very different. And I think families, parents, caregivers, whoever it is, if it's grandma, auntie, whoever it is that's providing the care for the child, they need to take some time to ask questions of that child. Don't just make assumptions thinking that they're okay with the choice. Actually have a conversation. I did talk with my 14-year-old to say to him, do you want to return to the building? Because our level of anxiousness, they experience that also. So I would share with parents and really encourage parents to have conversations with their children about what is going on. Ask them, like, how are you feeling about this? Do you feel comfortable? Do you feel ready to re-engage in that way? Also ask them, how are you feeling about being on the computer? I've had friends share with me that their children, you know, are like borderline depressed because they're in the house, they're on the computer, they don't necessarily have an outlet, they miss that social interaction. So I think probably one of the primary things that all of us as parents, caregivers can do is to really just check the social emotional well-being of our children. That is like super, super important. Like, have conversations with them. Don't just, oh, they're in the room, they're okay. Talk to them, ask them. And Tia, I'm waiting, I'm trying to tee that up for you to really get to what's going on with them. You know, there's a saying, 7 brothers, 7 different minds. Even though you have children, they're your children, you have 2 siblings, same parent household, they just come to things differently. My sister is a creative. My older sister, she's a creative. That's where she flows, that's what she does. So her being, during the pandemic, I mean, she has like a book full of ideas, and that's her. Whereas I'm like, oh my goodness, every day it's the same thing. Okay, I have to come to the computer because we process different, we feel different. So I think probably, you know, in Miss Haldane, maybe you were looking for something very profound, but I think at the real core of it, we have to check on the emotional, the social emotional well-being of our children, because it does make a difference in how they learn and how they interact. But Tia, I'm waiting for you to chime in on that one.
So do you have another question for me, Miss Violette, or?
I will, but you can, you know, if you.
Well, she answered the question. I agree with everything she said about that.
Okay, how about this?
Tia.
How can parents support their children if they will be doing distance learning?
Okay. So I'll start with that one. I think the first thing, I'm looking at my notes here, I think the first thing for distance learning is finding a quiet place. So making sure your child goes to bed on time and still wakes up at the regular time and still gets dressed. So I've been on a couple calls or Zoom calls where I've seen children in bed under the covers with bonnets on. So the first thing a parent needs to do is make sure their child goes to bed on time and still wake up at a normal time. Also setting up a place in the home just for distance learning. So if you have a small apartment, a small home, a corner works. So you can take a corner in a bedroom or in your living room or your kitchen and just set that up for distance learning. Maybe put a chair there, a little table or a little side table. You can even decorate the area, maybe put some things on the wall like, you know, affirmations like you can do this, things like that. So decorating or having a designated area just for distance learning. So the child knows they wake up, they go to the living room or they go to the kitchen table, and that's where my distance learning takes place. Like I said before, also getting dressed, waking up, getting dressed, brushing their teeth, the same routines they would do on a day-to-day if they were going to school. I also suggest students completing the work assigned for that day. So if a teacher gives an assignment and she says it's Monday and it's due Wednesday, I would suggest doing the work Monday and not waiting until Tuesday night. So whatever's assigned that day, try to complete it that day. Some students I've noticed will wait till the end of the end of the week and try to get it all done at the end of the week. Also, making sure monitoring your child on the computer. So a lot of students will log on through their phone or on the computer and they're still surfing and they're on, you know, they're on social media or they're on Google. So monitoring what the child is doing. Avoid games during distance learning time and games on their phone. Avoid using their cell phone. So if you have a laptop, you know, maybe having your child give you their phone or their laptop or their iPad or whatever, so they're just focused on their laptop. Good lighting is a great thing. Comfortable seating as well. So if you can provide comfortable seating, some children learn best maybe sitting at a table or a desk. Others may feel more comfortable sitting on the couch. Also, time management is important, and I think that's pretty much it. And troubleshooting their technology. So before the class logs on, so if the class logs on, the teacher says, please log on by 9, troubleshooting and getting on 15 minutes ahead, teaching your child those skills as well.
Okay, thanks. Can someone give me an idea of if someone is doing online learning, is it still a regular school day or is it part of the day? Is the student sitting in front of the computer from 9 to 3? What?
I think it depends on
it does depend. Yeah.
It depends on the district. So my child, in his school, he had to log on 9 to 10, then he had a break, and then he logged on 10:30 to 11:30, then he had a whole break, and then the last class was like 2 to 3. So some schools may give you the work and say you may check in with the teacher a couple times a week. Maybe you check in, you know, once a day. It depends on the school. So each family needs to talk to their child's teacher or figure out what's going to be expected at their district. Nuchette, how are they doing it in Hartford Public Schools?
So from March to June, it really depended on grade level as well as teacher and how the teachers created like their schedule. So I know that many school districts this time around, starting in September, are looking to provide live instruction. So for a while, it was either pre-recorded or it was a lesson kind of uploaded. The students then went to the lesson. They took in the lesson, processed the lesson, worked on whatever the assignment was, but that live instruction was missing. And so many districts, including Hartford, are really looking to get back to live instruction. There's something to be said when a student sees a teacher in front of them, they're having the dialogue, the interaction, the connection. So it's distance learning. It's still distance learning, but there are two components to it. Are the lessons going to be uploaded, or is it going to be live instruction happening in real time with the teacher in front of the students? So it's still distance learning, but it's either live instruction or it is not. But just coming back to, and Tia, I so agree with everything that you said. I was looking at my notes on my phone here, and it's super, super important for parents to create that system. Just like how you got up at 6 o'clock, if it took you from 6 to 7:15 to get ready for the day, do that, get into that habit. So I think you hit the nail on the head with that one for sure. And the only piece that I would add for parents supporting their child through distance learning is the same advocacy, the same ways that you interacted with the teacher in real time. And so if you are a mom and you have a little one, if you were that parent that you're going to call the teacher to check in, call the teacher now. Just because it's distance learning or it's virtual, don't kind of step away from that. And I saw a lot of that happen between when we went from our shutdown to June, where parents kind of were like, oh, it's online. It's almost like abandoning ship. I like to share with families, and I like to share with parents that you are the CEO of your child's educational process. You're that chief executive officer for their educational process. So we can't abdicate and just say, oh, well, they're in middle school, they're in high school, oh, they'll figure it out. No. You really have to take time, especially in this distance virtual way, to ask different questions. I know the digital divide. My 6-year-old can take any device, Tia, and flip it upside down 6 different ways, and he knows what he has to do. And as a parent, there's still apps and other technology platforms that kind of scare me. But as caregivers, we have to now, and some school districts are doing that. I know in Hartford, we will be doing that, providing videos and ways for parents to understand differently. So when your child says to you, oh, I did upload my homework, but then you go to try to find it, you're like, oh, I can't find it, that you're not stumped and you're not confused at the end of the semester when you're like, well, they said they turned in all their homework, but then the teacher is saying to you, oh, no, I got no assignments. Like, I see they logged in every day, but I got no assignments. So another way that parents and caregivers can really support their child is confronting that fear, if it is a fear, and taking time to understand the technology, taking time to still have real conversation with teachers and knowing who to contact. Another big one that came up a lot with families during from March to June, was this whole rubric. Everybody's like, what's a rubric? What's that? What does it matter? And so understanding like the various terms, and I know that's something we're trying to put together. It's like a glossary of terms for parents. So when the teacher says it, or you see it on something that comes across your child's screen, at least you are armed with what the words mean, and you can have a different conversation with the teacher, the principal, whomever. So that's the only thing I wanted to add to that.
Okay. So did teachers this summer get training on how to train or work with the students online?
Well, maybe not this summer, but I know teachers are going back. They'll be going back within the week or so for training. But I know teachers are going back soon.
Right. But over the summer, so in a school year, yes, when the school year ends, there are still some like professional learning days, and then there are pieces that they kind of do on their own. Administrators, we're going to be having Advent Institute starting Wednesday. So yes, they are there. Tia's like smiling like,
Well, the teachers, I'm talking on behalf of the teachers. We're anticipating like a week from now or so.
Okay, so they will get some tips on how to do it to keep the students engaged, because I know, Tia, that you do a lot of online things. I've seen some of your coursework. What type of things are kids interested in, and what type of things do they have the most success with? What type of techniques or tools?
Well, with my online classes this summer, I've did a lot of fun, things this summer, not really educational as far as academics, more leisure things. But what I have noticed, the big thing is getting students up. So I do teach a class, which is a kidpreneur class, teaching children how to start their own business. So during my class, we do take breaks for games. And one game that we play, the kids love, it's called Show Me. So I'll say like, okay, you have 10 seconds, show me toothpaste. They have to run, get up, and run to the bathroom and show me toothpaste. So I feel like getting the kids up and doing activities with them where they're not just sitting in front of the screen the whole time. Also going into chat groups, like for Zoom, you can go into groups. So you may talk with the group. Maybe you have 12 kids in the class. You may talk with them, and then you can break the kids up into groups, and they can do group work, do group work as well.
Okay, okay. When the kids go back to school, what services or support will there be for them in regards to COVID? Or what is it going to look like when they return to school?
So when students return to school, of course, trying to ensure that, I'm trying to find the right word, I guess normalcy is the best word. As best as can be normal right now, given the pandemic, is what we're trying to achieve. So if there were before and after care programs at that particular school, following guidelines, that's what we want to ensure is provided. If students, some of our schools are full service community schools, so they have clinical partners in their building, trying to ensure that whatever services students received being in the building when we were not in a pandemic, those are services that we want to continue to provide, understanding that there will be changes to certain policies. So visits to the building from, folks just coming to the building, that's going to look and feel different because we want to protect students, we want to protect children. But as far as before care, after care, clinical services, having the nurse there, those are services that will continue in our school buildings. And again, if there's a change or a shift in the pandemic that causes us to have a pivot, then we'll reevaluate and assess if those services would continue. But we want to ensure that students just operate in the normal fashion that they were accustomed to. What things could be impacted? Definitely lunch. So are we going to be able to eat in the lunchroom like we used to? Still trying to wade through that and figure out what is going to work best. Does it make sense to have the littles in their classroom to eat lunch? Do we want students, I'm sure all of us have seen all over the news, the students passing in the hallway. So if we bring all of these students into the cafeteria for lunch. So those are all pieces that have to be worked out in real time. But services, we want the services that students are used to. If they're going to the speech pathologist, if they need to see the school social worker, all of those services can be delivered to them. We did utilize a telehealth line from March to June. That was really, really impactful for families. So we want services to be there, but some of them may be virtual, some of them may be in the building.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to the chat with some of the questions. What is in regards to busing? How will busing be affected?
So busing is going to be impacted. Busing is going to be impacted. So you figure a school bus could hold upwards of 50 students comfortably. That's going to change. So the state has provided guidance for busing, and school districts are going to have to follow that. So if you are coming from the same household and you're riding on the same bus, you can sit together, but students have to follow the diagram laid out. It's like a diagonal pattern of every other seat. You will need to wear your mask. The conversation that I know I've been having with myself is like, wow, the bus drivers, like, are they going to have a monitor? Is there going to be support for them? Because they need to have a supply of extra masks on hand because a student can't get on the bus without a mask. But busing is going to be impacted, and impacted in several ways, that we may need more buses on the road to get children and transport children to school safely. So that's a conversation we need to have with legislators and state reps and all of those folks that are at the tables of decision to say, we need to ensure that our bus companies have what they need, because they're going to have to sanitize buses. So, Mr. Stapleton, great question. Buses, they will be affected in a major way. All of us have been in the morning upset the bus is taking too long, but we don't realize, how much we depend on buses to get children to school all across the state. Another question that someone asked me in another forum, what about our students who are getting on the bus at 5:30 a.m. to get across, 3-4 towns because they're in a magnet program, or what we, called then Project Concern? That's real. So now they're on a bus really for a really long time. That means that if they're in the building and they have to wear their mask for 5 hours, now we're adding another 45 minutes each way. So it's something that we have to talk about and continue to talk about to figure out what is going to be the best way for our students to be transported safely on the bus. So great question, Mr. Stapleton.
Nuchette, I have a question. Do the students, are they aware of what's going to happen at school? Are they aware how school's going to look? The reason why I ask is I work with a lot of high schoolers, middle schoolers, teenagers, and a lot of them can't wait to get back to school. So they're like, I want to go back. I'm tired of distance learning, but I'm not sure they're aware how school will look. So if you're in a classroom all day, let's say, your friend group may not be in that classroom. So a lot of them want to get back to that socializing. So how will it look for, let's say, 8th grader? How will that look? Will they be able to socialize with friends, or will they be in a classroom all day?
So depending, again, each school has received basic operating procedures that we created from a district level. From those operating procedures, now looking at the school, because every school is built differently, so the lay of the school looks different. So the tenet of the plan is the same, but how it's enforced, delivered at each school would look and feel different based on the layout of that school. So teachers may need to be moving in and out of classrooms versus students. Now, I have a high schooler, and for him, in his mind, what you said, Tia, is exactly it. He's like, I'm going to school, I'm going to hang, we're going to talk. You are going to talk, but what you are probably thinking in your mind, it's going to be an adjustment for all of them. And so that's why I'm really trying to stress to parents, to caregivers, check in, check in, please, because, they might be in a class with somebody they really don't feel like. I'm not feeling that person, but that's who you are going to be with, maybe for like the first 2 blocks, right? So I think it's going to be a conversation and a constant readdressing with the students. So you're right, even though parents are telling them, they're reading it, we polled students, we've had conversations with students, there have been focus groups with students, all of that. In their world, it's just, we're going back to school because they are tired of distance learning. Yeah. So can you help us with that, Tia? As you're meeting with it.
I think we need to, I'm willing to post it, because I don't think the average 9th grader or 10th grader knows that when you get back to school, you may be in your first 3 blocks and the teacher's rotating. They think we're going back with masks, but we can still hang out. No. You may be stuck in a room for 3 hours and no one in the room is in your friend group. So I think the students need to become aware. There needs to be some kind of, cute flyer or something like, hi kids, this is how school's gonna look, because they're not quite aware of what it's gonna look like. I feel families know, the community's finding out, but the actual students, I don't feel they all know what it's gonna look like.
And they may have like an idea, but I think what you said is so important, that helping them to kind of digest it differently, like, hey, by the way, I know you heard this, but we really want you to hear this. So
exactly, before they get there, prepare them as a community. This is what it's going to look like.
For sure.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to go to another question. This one is about open choice. If your child goes to school in a different district, and because of health reasons, you want your child to do distance learning, How do you go about that? You live in Hartford, your child goes to school in a different district, but for health reasons, you do not want your child to physically go to school. How do you, what's the, how do you handle that? What's the process?
So the student is an open choice, meaning
Yes.
they are either in one of a magnet school, they go to school outside of Hartford.
Yes.
Possibly. Okay.
Yes.
So that child is a student of record in that town.
Yes.
So the distance learning option would need to be navigated through that town.
Mm-hmm.
And if the distance learning option is not available, I think that's something to talk about, because as the governor said, if you read through the state plans, again, it should be an option. It's something that's supposed to be an option. So if that receiving district for the Hartford student does not have that as an option, I think that's a conversation to have with the district directly. Mm-hmm. Now, from the question, and this also looking back at March of this year, we ran into that where folks were calling the Welcome Center because their district was not necessarily handing out devices, but that student is a student in that particular town. So that's where it really does get dicey. But if they are enrolled, and I'm going to pick on Windsor, if they're enrolled in Windsor, then the town of Windsor needs to be working with that family to ensure that there's a distance learning option.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. For seniors, what is the plan for graduation? Are we doing anything special to make sure that our students are on track?
And so I'm going to, excellent question. So I'm going to ask, you're not supposed to answer a question with a question, but I'm going to. So on track, because I hear families, parents, caregivers use that term on track, but I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So what do we mean by on track?
That they know what they need to know so that they can be successful if they go to college, their first year.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Haldane. All right, because, and I love how Ms. Haldane answered that, because when people say on track, they're like, oh, well, they're on track. They, they took their 2 years of math, they have Spanish, whatever. But students, as Ms. Haldane said, we need to ensure that they are well-rounded, they are ready to get out into the workforce, into the community, and be able to continue their learning process. And I think what the pandemic has, and not just the pandemic, and Ms. Haldane, I've had this conversation with you, but as we're talking about families and how we support our students, it's so much more than just saying, okay, they got 5 classes, they got 5 A's in all the classes, so they're on track. I think there's a gray area that we need to bridge as a community, that just because they got the 5 A's doesn't necessarily mean that they're on track. So that's why I wanted to ask the question. But I think right now what we can do to ensure is, again, as the CEO of their educational process, how are we helping them? So yes, schools are preparing our children to the best of their ability for the real world, but what are we, how are we kind of supplementing that and asking additional questions and ensuring that what they got the A in, like when I look at the report card, when I look at my son's report card, okay, so tell me about English. Like, tell me about it. What's going on in English? Oh, well, we had to read a book. Well, what was the book about? Who was, all of those critical thinking skills that, yes, they got the A, but I also need to ensure that they are processing and digesting and not just regurgitating what was given to them in class. For me, that's how we support our children being on track. Not a popular answer. I know I'm like the outcast when I say it. Yes, school does their part, but I think as families, we also need to ensure that students are not just going through a class, doing the bare minimum to get the A, but really rising to the occasion in doing real work, challenging themselves. If the teacher told them to read these number of books over the summer, how are we saying to them, okay, well, you had to read these 2 books, but you probably could do a little more. Recently, I started a little group with my son and a couple of his friends for that same reason, Ms. Haldane. I want to ensure that you are going into the 9th grade fully equipped, and Windsor is a great school district, but I want to ensure that you're fully equipped, that you're understanding what took place between 8th grade into 9th grade. So when we talk about what are we doing for our seniors to ensure that they're on track, I think as a community, we can start with mentors to kind of work one-on-one with them, to figure out, okay, is there a gap somewhere along the way that we need to help fill in as a community? Can the school do that? Yes. Do they have mentor groups? Yes. People like the Urban League, Ready CT, Connecticut Rise, they come in and they do that. But I also think as a broader community, the West Indian community, since it's us here having the conversation, I think we can do the same and ensure that our students, while they're getting the straight A's, are there other things that we can challenge them in doing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. And how about the kids that are lagging behind? Is the school prepared or able to do anything to kind of bring them up?
Great question.
Very, very good question. Great question. It's an area that Dr. Torres Rodriguez, over the last couple of years, that definitely she's focused in on. She has taken time to look at data using a cohort of students that graduated in 2016 and looking at what she's calling and what we've called as a district early warning indicators. And those early warning indicators, absenteeism, failing 2 or more classes, looking suspensions, looking at those early warning indicators and figuring out how do we run interference, especially with our 8th graders that are coming in, to give them the supports that they need starting that summer before 9th grade to ensure that they do not become, I guess in air quotes, off track. Trying to find ways to bring in additional tutors. You know, as a district, yes, we are strapped for cash, but having additional tutors to work with students is another piece of it. We have implemented student engagement specialists to work with those students who may have some of those EWEs. In our high schools, there are freshman classes that are broken out, and they're working with them as a group, but also individually to ensure that they're receiving extra supports, extra help, so they do not go all the way off track. So are there additional supports that are needed? Absolutely. Do we need, I'm trying to figure out the right way to say this. Do we need additional dollars, and not to make it about money? Do we need additional dollars to help boost some of that? Yes. But right now as a district, our superintendent has taken the time to look at how our 8th graders, especially that are graduating and going into 9th grade, how we can support them differently. And then you think about our younger students, those pivot grades. So students going into kindergarten, students going into 4th grade, students going into 6th grade, like those pivotal years where they're making those transitions. How are we supporting those students, and how are we looking at data to ensure that they are receiving the supports early on? So by the time they get to 8th grade, hopefully they won't be in that block of students that have those early warning indicators.
I have a question, Nuchette. You spoke about absenteeism. How is the district going to determine if someone's at school? How will a teacher take attendance?
So teachers do take attendance in their Google Classrooms. And believe it or not, even during the pandemic, we, with the student engagement specialist, the family liaisons were actually in the classrooms helping and assisting to take attendance. Did we have some students who from March till June did not log into a classroom? Yes. And when we pulled that data point, we were out there knocking on doors. The superintendent even went out with a principal and one of the FCSSPs. So that's the level of intentionality that we're trying to get to. That, yeah, I'm preparing my team that, all right, understand we're still going to be doing home visits even during the pandemic, of course, protecting yourself and doing all of that. But that's how attendance is being addressed, that it's being taken. And again, not just to say I logged in, but you need to be logged in and also participating and submitting assignments, because the reports were ran that way. Did they log in? Did they not log in? They logged in, but they weren't really engaged. And so that's how we're looking at the reports to determine attendance.
So a student can, let's say we do the hybrid, that comes up. So I could attend, let's say Monday, Tuesday, and then log in the other days. So I would still be counted for that week as a student.
You'd be counted for that week, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good question.
Okay. We're going to talk about technology and the digital divide. I think what did we see? I'm going to start off like that. What did we see? I know that Hartford gave out a lot of devices. I don't know if the devices had to be returned. And then once students had a device, were they able to use it, and were there enough devices or enough bandwidth in a home for everyone to use the devices they may have had? Did we run into any of those issues?
Ooh, Miss Haldane. Yeah, this topic gets me like, woo. Yes, so we did, you know, I had colleagues in other urban districts who were like, Nuchette, you and the superintendent are absolutely bananas, thinking that each and every student needs to have a device. And I'm like, no, they do. They need to have a device. However, what we were faced with, and again, trying to pull families, and of course, the first couple of days that we did it, you know, people were videoing and Facebooking and all that. Oh my goodness, this is crazy, all of that. But the mandate was we wanted all of our students to have an opportunity to have a device so they can do their schoolwork. Now, I keep saying that, do I believe that schools and educational outfits are social service agencies to a certain degree? Yes. But I just did not understand how it became that in addition to providing all the other services that we provide as a school and continue to provide, even during the pandemic, that now we need to figure out a broadband issue. I was floored by that. I was completely floored by that. I'm like, oh, so it's okay, that's something we have to figure out. So we distributed well over 11,000 devices to students. And we distributed everything we had on hand. We ordered new devices. We continued to distribute devices well through the end of May, beginning of June, because we did a round of home visits, knocking on doors. So we found that some of the kids that had not logged in, for whatever the reason, when distribution days happened, mom, dad, whoever it was couldn't get there, they were still able to get a device so they could at least participate in summer learning opportunities. So over 11,000 devices were distributed. I know I worked with a couple of internet providers, and they were giving us all kinds of stories about, okay, it's $9.95, but then after you talk to them, so the long and short, Ms. Haldane, is that we handed out devices. Yes, there were broadband issues for families, but not something a school district can take on by itself. So the good thing is that we met with legislators. Senator Blumenthal had a press conference where he had an opportunity to talk to parents directly, as well as one of our community-based organizations who gave him the real deal. Like, they cut no corners. Like, they gave him the heavy and the skinny. So I know the city of Hartford announced, I want to say last week, that they are providing internet service across the city. I don't have the ins and outs of how that's going to look or feel. I know in another space, I'm like, could we just pull on the Wi-Fi from some of these companies that are sitting in our community? I don't know, 9 to 3, because I think there are ways that we can do this. So I'm happy that the city has stepped forward to provide the internet service, but definitely we're going to continue to ensure that families have devices. I'm working on a plan right now. Families were able to keep their devices, but depending on grade levels, so our little ones, kindergarten, pre-K kindergarten, we want them to have an iPad. Students who are first grade to sixth grade, a Chromebook is probably what's best for them. It's easier to navigate. And then our middle school and high school students would need a real laptop. So we probably will have to do some exchanging. So be on the lookout for dates and times and places for families to exchange and get another device. And as a district, we've ordered additional devices to distribute, but families were able to keep their devices over the summer and have them with them for summer learning opportunities.
Thank you for that. In giving out all of these devices, are we teaching the kids how to use them? Because I know that, you know, I work with a bunch of kids and they use Google, they're required to use Google Docs, and they've never had a lesson. So they're fiddling around and they're doing stuff, but I would think that if I had to use something, I would get like a basic course, because I'm sure there's tricks to the trade that they could be doing, and, you know, fancy stuff or some basic stuff that they could probably need. So we're giving out all these devices, but are we also given any training on how to best use the devices?
Great question. Something that I'm going to take back, Ms. Haldane, because again, you know, the pandemic exposed a whole bunch. And so, of course, 21st century learners, they're supposed to be digital natives, and, you know, folks saying, oh no, we're using technology in our schools, but with the question you just raised, that would lend to ask the question, well, if it was being used, and students probably should have some wherewithal to use it, you know? So I think it's something I will take back. I mean, we've been working very, very hard with teachers, administrators, trying to get videos together for families. But if students don't know how to access Google Docs or how to upload or something like that, yeah, that's something that needs to be addressed.
No, yeah, I think a basic course on some of the tools.
Maybe the younger ones probably don't, but I feel like the older ones should know how to use Google Docs, you know. First graders, maybe not, but the 11th grader knows how to use Google Docs.
They don't know all of the features, and they fudge a lot of stuff. If you sit with them or you say, can you do this or whatever, you suddenly realize that things that you thought they knew,
they don't know. Got it.
They don't know what they don't know. They don't know what the capabilities are because they've never been exposed to it. And so if you show them one time, they'll get it and they'll understand it. But it's not even knowing that that option or that capability is there.
Right.
Yeah, they can write a paper and do a PowerPoint, but no, the basics.
I have a question. I have another question. Go ahead.
I was going
to ask you about face masks. Is the district going to provide face masks? And also, I know like the little ones, will they be providing like the child-sized face masks?
So yes, again, as a district this summer, PPE, masks. People have reached out to our office to donate masks, and yes, and yes, because at the end of the day, and Ms. Haldane, I know you know this from being around the district, and you know, like when we had our back to school event last year, yes, there is going to be a shortage, and families are not going to necessarily have. I know when I ride through the city, I always have extra masks, because even though there's an order for masks, people aren't wearing masks. You know what I mean? So yes, there will be extra masks in the schools. Students will receive a mask, but there will be extra, you know, what happens if they drop their mask? Let's not take for granted that some families, even though it might be a mask that is reusable, who's to say that they can necessarily wash the mask every night, you know? So definitely, I mean, another great question, but PPE is something that we are like trying to hoard and stock, because we know that we're going to need it. We're going to need it.
Before we move on with the masks, I do have to plug and tell you, Nuchette, if the district can buy or get the clear masks, because they do have clear masks so you can see the lips. Because I know I'm a parent who has a special needs child. My son's deaf, he reads lips. And I know as a kindergarten teacher, I was a kindergarten teacher for many years. So if I'm teaching a child how to read or how to say a sound, they need to see my lips.
That's right. That's right.
So if the district, I don't know if they have or not, but there are masks that are clear so that we can see the teacher's lips and see the children's lips.
Yes, it's been a part of the conversation for exactly
great.
that. Our English language learners.
Right.
You know, you said that, you know, your child has a special need. My little guy was the same thing, you know.
Right.
He needed to, as he was learning his sounds, had his ear tubes put in, he needed to be able to actually see straight on what was taking place. So yeah, it's something that's being discussed, is on the table, because so many of our children are in different places. So great point.
Ms. Nuchette, do you have any questions for us? Because we've been asking you a lot of questions.
I don't mind. So I do have some questions, because I believe the Jamaica Progressive League is on the phone.
Yeah, Beverly's with the social club.
Okay.
With the
when you asked the question, and I don't know if it's a question, but also a statement about students being on track. And no, I was not born in the beautiful Isle of Jamaica, but I am a proud. My mother tells me all the time, like, well, that's not what your birth certificate says. I get it, but that's all I know, right? But thinking back to the way in which I was raised, Tia, I am really, really asking, admonishing, begging all of our West Indian organizations to please re-engage with our schools and with our students and with our families. And the reason why I'm really like begging is because I see there's such a disconnect. There's such a disconnect. And thinking about, yes, I went to school in Windsor, but you know, I hung out with my cousins who lived on Thomason Street and hung out with my family, artist collective, did all of that. And just the presence of the West Indian organizations looked and felt different, even though I didn't go to school in Hartford. So just really asking, in my role as the chief of family and community partnerships, there's different ways that organizations can support a school. You can adopt a school, but just really asking to please plug in to our schools. Right now, we're trying to figure out ways to have volunteers volunteer virtually. You know, maybe help a teacher out in a Google Classroom, but just your presence. Yes, I know the North End historically has more West Indians, that's okay. There's many schools in the North End that need support, need folks to wrap around them, principals that are there that would welcome it. So that's just really what I'm asking. I'm really begging for that to happen. If working with students directly is not necessarily the forte, what can we do to really bolster our families? Some parents are working 2, 3 jobs. I mean, after my father passed, my mom, she had to do that. But how can we support parents? How can we help parents understand why they have to stay engaged? What can we be doing as a West Indian community to bolster parents and help them feel that they're equipped, that they're ready to support their children? So that's my plug for the evening. Well, not really a plug. I was begging, I guess, Tia. I guess I was really begging, but that's what I would really ask. And then hopefully we can do this again, you know, not in this virtual way, but we can actually have a sit-down forum with families and students to talk about and hear from them. And maybe that's a question, Ms. Haldane, like how do we get from our West Indian community, what is it they need from the school district and what they need from all of us?
Okay, I hear what you're saying, and I think one thing that our community needs to address is our undocumented students, because I am beginning to run into some of them. And when you talk about stress, because they know that they're okay, but as they start reaching 16 and 17,
Yes.
it's becoming more stressful on them if something happens and someone realizes that they're here, that they overstayed their visitor's permit.
Correct.
And I think that's something that we as a community need to look at also for our students, because that population is out there and it's invisible, but it's real, and they will become adults.
Yes. And it does impact them. I mean, there have been some that have come through that the idea of what they've worked for, talking about the student who's on track, like on track, they did everything correct, right? And then to get to senior year and realize like, that's it. Like I can't, you know, so it's a real concern. It's a real concern.
Right. Ms. Beverly, would you like to say something?
Yes, I would like to go back to the question around parents being involved or the community being involved, the organization being involved. But I believe one of the major challenges is the digital divide between the parents and the children. And so when you engage the parents, they will tell you they're totally lost. They don't know what their kids are doing. They don't know how to get on a computer. They don't know how to type. They have 2 jobs. But the big piece of it is the digital divide in the virtual world. It's a stress unto itself. I'm not sure what the school system is doing, if they can do anything, but I think that would be a point that we could start for the community to get around the school system or to get around a school, is really to get the parents to understand what it is that their children are doing or need to do in this pandemic period. So I don't know if you could add to that.
Yes. And so I always say to parents, like when they call the Welcome Center, or, you know, I'm in the grocery store or at church, and I'm like, you have your phone, right? Like, you have your phone. And everybody's like, yes, I have my phone, I have my phone. And I'm like, okay, we'll start with the phone. You can actually get into a Google Classroom from your phone. So I think a lot of times as parents, we're thinking about, like, I'm sitting in front of my computer. So Miss Beverly, you're absolutely correct. But I always encourage parents, like, you have this thing in your hand that's super, super powerful. And that's something I know my team is trying to work on, is like working a video or something to explain to parents, like, you have it right here, like, you use it, you know. If you only know how to use WhatsApp or what have you, or, you know, some of those other apps, teachers use those too. You know what I mean? So, and it's something that simple, but I think you hit the nail on the head, Miss Beverly, that sometimes parents just don't know, right? But this little device, we're trying to create a video to help parents understand, like, okay, start with your phone. Like, okay, the computer scares you, but you use your phone every day. So if you go on your phone, and even if you don't want to ask your student to do it, because we know students are slick, they'll set something else up, right? But, you know, a friend or somebody who could download it for you and kind of start the conversation there. But definitely, I think that's something we could partner on, is that when we have the video completed, to put it up on, you know, I don't know, your website, or share with families, or however you want to get it out to, you know, constituents or members of the organization, to say, you know, you can actually use your phone and not necessarily the computer. And that's just to start. But I think there's other things that we could definitely come together and try to figure out how. Because it is a fear. It's a real fear. It's a fear, a real fear.
It's not only a fear, it's a barrier for the children to succeed, because it's like 2 separate language in the household, and the children don't get the support, and the parents don't want the children to know how little they know about technology. So there's just such a big divide where that is concerned. And then you have in household, I mean, the school system is taking care of the hot spots, but you know, a lot of households don't have the equipment or the tools to even start learning.
Hmm.
And I think there's also the cultural divide. I know that a lot of Caribbean parents, they feel they look up to teachers and they look up to schools and they feel that they can't, I don't say challenge it, but go in and question. So are there standards? Is there a list of things that as you complete each grade you should be able to do? Does the city of Hartford have a list, or the state, that if you leave third grade, these are the things you should be able to do in math and reading and what you should know, so that parents at least have some frame of reference as to where their child should be, and we can begin to monitor better?
Yes, and that document, and Tia, I don't know if you would agree, the Common Core standards are, they're very technical, right? They are, they're like, oof. And I think some districts, I know years ago Hartford had like pulled it apart, like, so it was kind of more like a cheat sheet. But Ms. Haldane, that's something else that I'm going to take back to figure out, like, what can we do with it so parents know like what skills their children are supposed to master. And the other part to that I'm going to put on the table is understanding that, you know, everybody's in a different place coming in the door. So I think has to be said, Ms. Haldane, that some of the skills that might be listed in the Common Core standard, depending on where children enter or what the foundation was, they may or may not necessarily master all of those skills by the end of the school year. Mm-hmm. But they should be somewhere in, at least somewhere in the medium somewhere. They should hit something like that. But you know, it's the Common Core standards. The aim of it really was, if you live in Connecticut and you're in third grade, fourth month, and if you move to California and you get there and you start your third grade, fourth month, you're supposed to be about the same place. That was the whole idea. But another great question, because I think sometimes, you know, folks just don't know. Folks just don't know that, yes, by the time a student is leaving pre-K, they should at least have some sight words under their belt already. You know, and
30 words.
Right. So
30 sight words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Tia, do you have anything that you would like to ask the group?
No, I think I asked all my questions.
Okay.
Tia, I thought you were presenting. You asked questions, Tia.
Well, I mean, yeah.
I'm just bothering. Tia, you know I'm bothering you.
You gave us some good information, though.
Absolutely.
As a matter of fact, I think I might write an article with this. Do you have anything else to add, Ms. Nuchette?
No, just I think having community conversation is super important, and for me, it's like carrying water. The more folks in the community that have the information, then we can continue to pass it along to everyone. This week is the 13th, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. This Thursday, we're having another town hall for families. 5 to 6 is for Spanish-speaking families. 6 to 7 is for, 6 to 7 is for our English-speaking families. For the next couple of weeks, every other week, we'll be having a town hall, a community conversation, because again, just want folks to understand. And Tia, you gave me an idea, so I'm gonna reach out to you. I'm like, ooh.
Yeah, we need to do a kid town hall.
Yeah, I'm like,
town hall.
Yes.
That would be great.
Yeah, so that's, the only thing I would add is that this is fluid. I was sharing with other colleagues that none of us really have the answer, and that's okay, because it's uncharted territory. We don't know. This is not about any one person, but all of us are trying to navigate it together. So I thank you for the opportunity and look forward to having more conversation. I just think this is super important. Yeah.
Thank you. Can you send us the information on the town hall and we'll try to send it out? Thank you.
I will do that.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Does anyone have anything that they just have to say before we go? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you, everyone.
Thank
And
you.
really appreciate you coming out and spending this time with us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a
Bye.
good
Have
one.
a good
Bye-bye.
night.
Good
Bye-bye.
night. Bye.